Yo, hey, this shit easy, nigga. Hey, all I'm talking about, nigga, I'm still out here trying to get it.
Contender Regime Boxing, checking back in with y'all, man. What's going on? Hope y'all having a beautiful day out there, man. So, more Errol Spence and Terence Crawford talk. Of course, we still haven't got any promising news about the fight being done. No date, no venue. August 30th. I told y'all if the fight ain't made by the first week of September, it's highly unlikely that we'll get this fight this year. But, you know, there's some conversations going on around, fighters picking, and particularly fighters. Like, people respect their opinions, and rightfully so. These are the guys that go out there and do this shit night in and night out. These are the guys that put the hours in the gym. These are the guys that have the in-ring experiences and have a vantage point that us fans will never have for the most part. You dig what I'm saying? So, of course, there was the Hall of Fame ceremony or induction ceremony. Of course, a lot of the older fighters that were getting inducted, and then a lot of the guys that were just in attendance. This is the hottest fight, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. This is the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. This is the fight that everybody wants to see. So you know that this fight is going to come up in passing and in conversation. And people want to get the thoughts of these great fighters, man, and these great boxing minds. They want to see what they think. And, and I think that that's dope. So a few months back, they had the ceremony that Terence Crawford attended. A lot of people was talking about the different opinions from that ceremony. There was something recent as well. And then also Canelo Alvarez was asked during one of his workouts what he thought about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And he picked Terence Crawford. And he said that, I believe he said that Terence Crawford has more skills. He said he likes his skills. And I think he alluded to the idea that he believes Terence Crawford is just a more skillful fighter. And that's awesome. That's wonderful. I don't think Canelo Alvarez is wrong to have that opinion. I respect that opinion coming from a guy with the skill set of a Canelo Alvarez, and me personally, as a boxing fan, studying Terence Crawford and knowing what he brings to the table, knowing how incredible of a fighter he is, knowing how gifted athletically and just how skillful and how intelligent Terence Crawford is as a fighter, me knowing that myself, I can't be mad at that opinion. Even though I believe Errol Spence, on the other hand, you can make a strong case that Errol Spence is a more skillful fighter, at the very least, just as skillful. But that's what I really want to talk about in regard to both fighters and who is actually the more skillful fighter. I'm gonna give you an in-depth analysis and breakdown. Now, look, I done broke this shit down every which way. So a lot of this stuff y'all done heard me say before, and then also, I'll just give you just a little bit more insight on what I believe, looking at what has taken place recently in the last couple of years, the last few fights of both of these guys, and what I think that will look like if the fight actually takes place this year, you know what I'm saying, or whenever the fight actually happens. So, all right, so first and foremost, I just want to throw this out here just to put shit in perspective. Remember when Sugar Ray Leonard said Mikey Garcia was gonna beat Errol Spence? Remember that? What was his reason behind that? He said, because it's Mikey. If I'm not mistaken, James Toney actually said that Danny Garcia was going to beat Errol Spence. Did he actually give a reason? Now, I know Mike Tyson picked Terence Crawford as well, but he never really actually broke the fight down. He just said that Crawford was going to knock out Errol Spence. The point I'm making is that, and also Roy Jones Jr., he recently was on camera saying that he never watched Errol Spence fight. He only watched like highlights, or he never really got much opportunity to watch Errol Spence fight. and he's picking Terence Crawford. A lot of these guys that pick Terence Crawford, I'm not saying that they're wrong. I think they have a valid opinion. This is a 50-50 fight. I think Terence Crawford has a 50-50 chance of winning this fight, you know? And so I don't think these guys are wrong in having that opinion. All I'm saying is that I see a common theme when people do pick Terence Crawford, that they lack I would say an intelligent breakdown, or they lack, depth in the reasoning why they're picking Terence Crawford. And I love the boxing minds, and I respect these guys so much that I be wanting to hear more. You feel what I'm saying? But again, so I just wanted to throw that out there. Remember when Sugar Ray Leonard said Mikey Garcia gonna beat Errol Spence because he's Mikey, right? So look, let me just say this. I think both of these guys are extremely skilled. And I said this many times. I think that these guys are so close in skill, just overall skill. If it was fight night and both of these guys had they overall, I think both they overall gonna be very, very close. I think both of these motherfuckers will be in the 90s. You feel me? Like, they shit gonna be high as hell, and it's gonna be very, very close. This particular fight, in my opinion, comes down to more stylistic tendencies and, conditioning, and you dig what I'm saying? I think it'll come down to discipline. I think it'll come down to who has the more heart, who has the more dog. For this particular matchup, how each guy matches up stylistically, I think that's what this fight gonna come down to the most, more so skill, because both of these guys are extremely skilled. Now, I think Terence Crawford does things better than Errol Spence, and I think Errol Spence does things better than Terence Crawford. Now, let's break it down. Let's start from the basics. Who has the better jab? I think Errol Spence, it's not even close that Errol Spence has the better jab. I think Errol Spence overall is just a more fundamentally sound fighter. I think he's a more technically sound fighter. I think Errol Spence has a better jab. When you look at combination punching, I'm going to give that to Terence Crawford. I think Terence Crawford has the better combination punches overall when it comes to fighting, having an all-out firefight. I think Terence Crawford has better punch variation and better combination punching. However, Errol Spence has really good combination punching as well once he gets on that roll and start going downhill and get in the rhythm of throwing punches on you, especially on the inside. And we're going to talk about that as well. But the reason I'm not going to break down every single punch who got the better left hook, because number one, Terence Crawford is a switch hitter. Errol Spence is a southpaw, so his left hook is a right hook, and Terence Crawford has both a left and a right hook. So I wanted to break down the jab because that is the most common and the most fundamental punch that you gonna see in a fight. I think that's the most important punch for any boxer to have, and I think Errol Spence has the better one. And then instead of breaking down each and every punch individually, I'm just gonna say combination punching. I'm gonna get at to Terence Crawford. Now, hand speed. Terence Crawford, this is more so athleticism, so we don't even have to go into the athleticism, like each aspect, like hand speed or fast twitch muscles. I think Terence Crawford is the more athletically gifted fighter. But again, Errol Spence played multiple sports coming up. And if you just look at him, the dude is a physical specimen. You look how he move in the ring. You look at how he gets stronger as the fight go. You look at the way he pivot, the shit he able to do in the ring. He ain't no slouch athletically. So keep that in fucking mind. Even though I'm going to give Terence Crawford the athletic advantage. Now, when it comes down to footwork, I'm going to give that to Errol Spence. Again, number one, I don't think Terence Crawford's feet is the same as it used to be back at 130 and 140. However, even if it was, I'm going to still give Errol Spence the footwork game advantage, because his footwork, the pivot, and his distance control, and we're going to get into that as well, his distance control with the pivot and the ability to maintain leverage no matter what position he's in, always in a position to land a hard shot and to get those short, crisp shots off, always in a position to regain himself and get back on offense. I'm going to give Errol Spence the footwork advantage because he can do a whole lot more by doing less. Terence Crawford, he going to have to, especially in this fight, he going to have to be moving a whole lot. He going to have to be shifting laterally. He going to have to be doing a whole lot of turning and in and out. Terence Crawford is going to have to use a whole lot of foot movement and activity to do half of the stuff that Errol Spence is going to be able to do by not moving so much. Errol Spence's footwork is subtle. If you look at the pivot game, if you look at the way his stance and the way he's able to control distance just by taking a half step back or a full step back or pivoting to the left, pivoting to the right, and he controls motherfuckers with that shit, and it's accompanied with the jab as well. So all of this shit work in unison. That's why I just think that's why Errol Spence, in my opinion, is so underrated, because it's not flashy at all. All the shit that he does is the textbook fundamental shit that every boxer, I think, should learn. But everybody, even if they learn that shit, they're not able to execute it the way Errol Spence does. He's just a student of the game, and he's been taught so well that he's able to use those fundamentals accompanied with his natural athleticism, and it just makes for a perfect marriage and what you see as an end result in the ring. So I'm going to give Errol Spence the footwork advantage. You dig what I'm saying? Now, if you look at IQ, I think both of these guys are equal in IQ, to be honest with you. If I have to give a fighter the edge, I would give it to Errol Spence. I just think Errol Spence is a more disciplined fighter when it comes to being able to stick to a game plan, being able to execute a game plan, always having an answer for whatever his opponent is bringing. And Terence Crawford, you could say much of the same as far as always having an answer, always coming back with something. But in my opinion, with Terence Crawford, his adjustments are more like energy based. It's more emotional, because he don't really make a lot of he make adjustments. Just I told y'all, I broke it down when he made that adjustment with Kell Brook turning southpaw, knowing that because Kell Brook was killing his ass with the orthodox jab, so he knew Kell Brook was gonna keep using that jab, thinking he had some, and overextend himself. Terence Crawford turned southpaw and put his lead right hand in the front as a jab, and he knew he was going to be able to catch Kell Brook jumping in. That's a solid adjustment, but for the most part, Terence Crawford's adjustments in fights really just be turning up the energy, turning up the intensity, knowing that I'm just better than this guy. I can beat his ass. I can just start fighting, turn up my intensity, and I know he can't match that. You feel what I'm saying? But Errol Spence's adjustments be more technical, and again, I just think his discipline and his ability to stick to a game plan and execute that game plan. Ain't nothing better than having let's say you're a world-renowned trainer like a Derrick James. Ain't nothing better than having a coachable guy who can do everything that y'all worked on in the gym. You done formulated this game plan for a reason, and you done studied the other guy. You know what they gonna do, and you put this game plan together. Ain't nothing like a motherfucker being able to go out there and do that shit down to the T, and then being able to have that extra sauce on the end to make adjustments, just like he did in the Kell Brook fight, when Kell Brook, again, he was hitting he was having success with the jab and the straight right. This famous 1-2, jab, straight right. What Errol Spence started doing, he started feinting after the third or the fourth round. He started feinting, allowing Kell Brook to overextend himself, similar to similar to how Kell Brook did in the Terence Crawford fight. He overextended himself, and Errol Spence, he'll feint, let Kell Brook expose himself, and then Errol will come with his jab and straight left. And then once he closed that distance and get close to him, he just start welling on him and putting him in the blender. You know what I'm saying? Putting him in a goddamn on the spin cycle and fucking him up on the inside. You dig what I'm saying? So those are the type of small adjustments that Errol Spence make. But I'm going to give Errol Spence the IQ advantage, even though I think they very equal, just because I think Errol Spence, when it comes down to it, he's more disciplined. He'll stick to a game plan, and he know how to make adjustments as well. I think a lot of times Terence Crawford be going rogue in the ring and just be fighting off pure instinct. A lot of times that work, but how is that going to work when you got a guy that's just as much of a dog as you is? So when you turn it up, Errol Spence gonna turn that shit up as well, And then what you going after that is gonna come down to technical fundamentals. It's gonna come down to tendencies. It's gonna come down to conditioning. Who worked harder in the gym? Who gets stronger as the fight goes on? That's Errol Spence. As far as the dog and the heart, I think both of these guys got that dog and they got heart. Now we gonna have to see the fight to see who got more of that in them. I'ma leave that to y'all to say. I think both of these guys, they just got that dog and they got that heart in him. And I think this fight is gonna come down to a lot of that. You feel what I'm saying? Defense. There's a stat that says Terence Crawford gets hit the least at welterweight, or his percentage is lower than most fighters at welterweight as far as getting hit. Well, Terence Crawford don't throw as many punches as Errol Spence. Errol Spence throws way more punches than Terence Crawford. He has a higher work rate and a higher output, which I think is going to be very dangerous for a guy like Terence Crawford in this fight. And with him getting hit, Errol Spence numbers is not high on getting hit in this division. Errol Spence defense is really good, and when you consider the fact that he throws so many punches and still able to keep such a tight defense and protect himself and dish out way more than he take, I'm gonna give Errol Spence the edge on defense. I think he's just more technically sound on defense. I think he's just more fundamentally sound. He has a better guard. I think his ability to take side steps and take halves and full steps back to avoid shots, as opposed to Terence Crawford having to rely more on slickness and athleticism and natural fast twitch abilities. I'm gonna give defense the edge to Errol Spence because I think he's more technical with the shit. I think he's just more fundamentally sound on defense. So I'm going to give that to Errol Spence. Now, when I break all this shit down, I'm gonna throw out one more thing. I think Errol Spence is the better inside fighter, and I think Terence Crawford is the better outside fighter. With his reach, he does a great job of controlling distance from the outside, being able to land shots, keep guys on the end of his punches. Now, I think Errol Spence is by far the better inside fighter. I don't think Terence Crawford really like it on the inside like that. Now, here's the difference. Errol Spence can be just as good as Terence Crawford on the outside. Go back to his earlier fights, the Ronald Cruz fight. You know what I'm saying? Go back to his very first pro fight and watch how he boxed from the outside, counter punching and all of that shit. I think Terence Crawford is the better counter puncher, even though Errol Spence has the ability to counter punch and do all of these things, but he's been so dominant at 147 in his career that he hasn't had to pull out all of these extra tools. Go back and watch Errol Spence's first pro fight and watch how fluid he was with his boxing ability. Go back and watch the Ronald Cruz fight. Go watch the Mikey Garcia fight. You can see the lateral movement and you can see the jab and the ability to box and be calculated and fight, you know, not necessarily off of the back foot. Ain't too many guys that you done seen as able to push Errol Spence back, and I don't think Terence Crawford gonna be one of them. You know what I'm saying? But if you look at Errol Spence's ability to box, you will see that as far as fighting from the outside, he can do the same shit Terence Crawford can do. However, he just prefers to be a pressure fighter and come forward and fight on the inside. And the skill gap in Errol Spence being a better inside fighter than Terence Crawford is by far larger than Terence Crawford being a better outside fighter than Errol Spence. You feel what I'm saying? So when you break this shit down out of everything that we just discussed, you will come to the conclusion that both of these guys are very skilled fighters, and you could say that they're equally skilled. Me personally, I would lean towards Errol Spence's skill set more so than Terence Crawford, because I think with age and time, Terence Crawford's he might have a little bit of diminishment. Everybody, you know, as fighters get old, you gonna see that, you know, all of they shit start to go down. But I think Errol Spence's skill set will last the test of time as long as he got great condition, as long as he stand in shape. You will see those fundamentals and technical tendencies is gonna take him a lot further than a guy who relies on fast twitch muscles and shit like that. You seen what happened to Roy Jones. You feel what I'm saying? So the point I'm making is this: both of these guys are equally skilled, in my opinion. It just depends on what you like, what style you like. I think Canelo Alvarez, he likes Terence Crawford's style better. Canelo himself is one of the best counter punchers in the sport of boxing, as is Terence Crawford. That's what they do. They set traps and they line you up for shit. That's what Terence Crawford do at his best. And so I can understand why he would prefer that style. I think in this fight, it's not going to necessarily come down to who's the more skillful fighter, even though I think it may be ERROL Spence. I think it'll again come down to the stylistic matchup. It's going to come down to the will to win. It's going to come down to dog. It's going to come down to discipline. It's going to come down to conditioning. It's going to come down to IQ. It's going to come down to the coaching. You know what I'm saying? It's going to come down to the game plan. It's going to come down to all of that shit that people overlook. You know what I'm saying? All of the flashy shit that everybody talk about, that's gonna matter, but it's not gonna matter as much as the shit that I'm talking about. You know, all the fundamental shit, and you know, the intangible shit. That's what this fight gonna come down to. So y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments, man. I know this was a rather long video, you feel what I'm saying, but I really wanted to break this down. I thought it was a good conversation, and I want to see what y'all think, man. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Contender regime boxing, I'll holla at y'all boys, man.